Hello, and thank you for joining this presentation from the Minnesota Department of Transportation. We are excited to provide an overview of our National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure, or NEVI program, and this request for proposals. This is a recorded presentation and will remain available to potential responders and the public for your reference and use. The information being shared today is correct to the best of MnDOT's knowledge. NEVI is a program that is new for MnDOT, and we may experience some shifts in the timelines and process we provide within the presentation as the process matures. Should any changes be made to the RFP or attachments, those will be disclosed through an RFP addendum. All up-to-date NEVI-specific material, including the RFP package, is located at the MnDOT NEVI website, which can be found at www.dot.state.mn.us/NEVI. We will also push out updates through our NEVI email list. You can sign up for these updates by clicking on the link located under the Connect With Us section on the right-hand side of the screen. I do want to take a moment to introduce myself so you can put a face to my voice. I am Beth Croto-Callistad, and I am the MnDOT NEVI Project Manager, located in MnDOT's Office of Sustainability and Public Health. I am based out of our central office in St. Paul. My office and team are responsible for the implementation and deployment of the NEVI program. Today, we're going to cover the following topics: NEVI background, overview, and our goals for the program, a tour of the request for proposal package with some important highlights for applicants, applicant and cost eligibility, requirements the program must adhere to, how to apply to our NEVI program, how we will evaluate the applications we receive, and finally, our timeline for awards. I strongly encourage you to listen to this presentation in its entirety before fast-forwarding to specific sections. After listening to this overview and thoroughly reviewing the RFP package, we expect that some applicants may have questions. We will be taking questions via email through January 10th at 5 p.m. Central Time. Questions can be submitted by sending an email to neviproject.dot@state.mn.us with the subject RFP question. Questions should identify the following information: RFP document name you have a question about, the RFP document section number and page number, and the question you have. Questions without this information will not be addressed. Applicants will not receive individual responses to questions. MnDOT will publish written responses to the questions received by January 24th at 5 p.m. Central Time. Any person requiring the RFP in an alternative format, such as Braille, large print, or in a different language, can receive it at no cost. Please email your request to accessibility.dot@state.mn.us or call 1-833-400-8432, Relay Service 711. Any person requiring a special accommodation due to a disability should contact MnDOT by email at adarequest.dot@state.mn.us for assistance with this RFP at least 5 business days prior to the activity or action for which assistance is needed. NEVI is a brand new program for Minnesota and the first of its kind. To orient you, I'm going to briefly go over the basics of the National NEVI program and provide an overview and goals of our program here in Minnesota. The National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Formula Program was authorized under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law in November of 2021. This program provides $5 billion to state DOTs to implement a convenient, affordable, reliable, and equitable nationwide charging network that is open to the public. Minnesota is receiving a total of approximately $68 million in funding over a 5-year period through this program. $39 million is already available and will be used toward funding this RFP. The initial focus of the NEVI program is building out a fast charging network along all EV alternative fuel corridors, or AFCs. Charging stations off the AFC network and level 2 chargers will not be allowed under this RFP. These will be considered in the future after the AFC network is certified as fully built out. The alternative fuel corridors in Minnesota are Interstate 35 and Interstate 94. NEVI requires charging stations be located no more than 50 miles apart and no more than 1 mile off the corridor. Each charging station must provide at least 4 charging ports capable of providing 150 kilowatts per port simultaneously. All ports must also support the entire range of 250 volts to 920 volts. They must be available to the public 24 hours per day, 365 days per year. The Minnesota Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan is a required component of the NEVI program and was developed to help guide the deployment of EV charging infrastructure build-out in the state. The latest version of the plan, which was approved in September 2023, was developed in coordination with the public and other partners throughout the state. The plan builds on past efforts to plan for EV charging infrastructure in Minnesota. The plan must be updated on an annual basis, and these updates will be made in continued coordination with other stakeholders and the public. This RFP is phase 1 of our NEVI implementation in Minnesota and focuses on our 2 AFCs, I-35 and I-94. The RFP is a competitive selection process that makes NEVI funds available for both new charging stations and upgrades to existing charging stations, with the goal of building a complete charging network that meets all the NEVI formula program requirements. The RFP is focused on the design, construction, acquisition, installation, operation, maintenance, and ownership of charging stations along the AFCs. MnDOT will not own, operate, or maintain any charging equipment. Instead, MnDOT is looking for partners who will own, operate, and maintain the equipment for a minimum period of 5 years. Achieving full build-out of the AFCs in Minnesota is expected to require the installation of 18 charging stations. The general locations of the stations have been identified as clusters of interchanges where applications will be accepted. These clusters were selected to optimize an efficient build-out of the AFC charging network within Minnesota. MnDOT anticipates awarding a single site within each cluster as part of this RFP. Each applicant may only submit a single application per cluster, but applicants may submit applications for as many or as few different clusters as they would like. Federal NEVI funds can be used for up to 70% of the total eligible project costs, and the Minnesota legislature has provided funding for an additional 20%, meaning that applicants may seek up to a 90% total reimbursement through this RFP. The applicant must provide at least 10% of the total eligible cost. However, applicants may propose a lower reimbursement as part of their application. Clusters and exits that are eligible under this RFP are included in the online mapping tool on MnDOT's main NEVI page. The map also shows parcels that are located within a 1-mile drive distance from the AFC. The only exception to the 1-mile distance limit is for Cluster 9, which is the Minneapolis cluster where I-94 and I-35 meet. For Cluster 9, the site must be within 1 mile of both AFC corridors. This RFP will achieve several goals identified in the Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Plan. The identified clusters will efficiently build out the AFC network to maximize the utility of federal dollars while following the NEVI requirements. The RFP will allow the state to select sites using a best value approach from a pool of applicants with proven knowledge and experience installing EV chargers. The RFP process is open to everyone to encourage participation from disadvantaged communities. Additionally, MnDOT will not be responsible for the installation, operations, maintenance, or ownership of the charging infrastructure. That will be handled by experienced and qualified contract partners. Now we will review the contents of the RFP package. The RFP can be found at www.dot.state.mn.us/NEVI under How to Apply Step 1. There are 9 documents that are included in the RFP package. The first document is the Minnesota NEVI RFP. This document outlines the goals and priorities for the program eligibility, project requirements, how to apply, scoring criteria, the evaluation process, pre-award and post-award activities. The second document is Attachment 1 to the RFP, the technical requirements. This document outlines additional project requirements that must be included in the project. We want to highlight a few important technical requirements. The first is Requirement 1.1, distance from the AFC. The project site shall be within a maximum driving distance of 1 mile from the AFC. It should be noted that for Cluster 9, proposed sites must be within 1 driving mile of both AFCs, as indicated in the RFP. If the proposed project site is 1.01 miles, it is too far and will not be considered compliant with the requirements. Another important requirement is 2.6, NACS connectors. Each DCFC port must have at least one permanently attached NACS connector in addition to the required CCS Type 1 connector. This requirement must be met no later than 12 months after SAE standard J3400 for NACS has been published, or the end of the agreement term, whichever is earlier. The third requirement of note is 2.7, minimum power supply. The utility feed to the project site shall have a minimum power capacity of at least 150 kilowatts per port, and the EVSE shall have an input power rating of at least 150 kilowatts per port. If the proposed project does not meet this requirement, it will be considered non-compliant. The final requirement of note is 2.4, output current limit. The output current may be the lower of 375 ADC or the current required to reach 150 kilowatts based on the output voltage. All combinations of voltage and current that fall within the required operation area in Figure 1 must be supported by the EVSE. All charging ports shall be capable of providing a continuous power output of at least 150 kilowatts simultaneously from each charging port at the charging station. EVSE shall be capable of providing DC output voltages within the entire range of 250 to 920 volts. If the proposed project does not meet this requirement, it will be considered non-compliant. The third document in the RFP is Attachment 2, Scope of Work and Deliverables. The scope of work identifies the tasks, schedule, and deliverables required of each grantee upon the selection of a site. Tasks include Task 1, Preliminary Engineering and NEPA Clearance, Task 2, Final Design and Permitting, Task 3, Construction and Commissioning, Task 4, Operations and Maintenance, Task 5, Reporting Requirements, and Task 6, Project Closeout. After confirmation of the successful completion of each task, MnDOT will issue a notice to proceed to the next task. Attachments 3, 4, and 7 are all components of the application that must be submitted with each application. Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, is to be completed for each proposed project. Applicants must complete each section of Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, and provide all required information and documents. The maximum number of pages shall be 30 pages, including text, graphics, tables, charts, and photographs. Resumes and technical specification cut sheets do not count toward the 30-page limit. Each question must be answered, and teams can choose how they allocate space in completing the form within the 30-page limit. Links to information outside of the form shall not be used and will not be reviewed. A couple of specific items to note in the technical application form. On page 15 of the form is section 19, Non-Technical Responsiveness Check. This list serves as a checklist for you to confirm that you have included or appropriately addressed each of the list items within the application. Remember to check either the yes or no box next to each requirement, confirming if you have met the requirement, as well as including the document and application page where confirmation of the requirement can be found. A second checklist that must also be completed in a similar manner is on page 16, section 20, Technical Responsiveness Check. If either of these checklists are not completed, the application may be considered non-compliant. If your application does not meet each of these requirements, the application may also be considered non-compliant. Page 18 of the application includes a summary list of all the items that must be included in the application, including the additional documents and signatures that must be provided with Attachment 3. If any of these documents is not provided, the application may be considered non-compliant. An important reminder, there are several places where authorized signatures are required. Don't forget to sign each form as indicated. Each application must also include a completed Attachment 4 cost proposal form. Applicants are to enter information only in the yellow cells. The formatting and formulas are not to be adjusted. The cost proposal requires applicants to include costs for each individual line item. If no cost is anticipated for a particular item, 0 should be entered. If a proposed cost item does not appropriately fit in the provided line items, it should be added into the other cell within each category, and a description must be provided in the corresponding description cell. There are a couple of cost items that can only be included in either the capital costs or the O&M costs. These include the costs of the EVSE and warranties. The O&M costs must also be provided for each individual line item for each year of O&M. Applicants must also provide the requested reimbursement percentage for both capital costs and O&M costs. These 3 attachments are not required to be used and are informational for applicants. Attachment 5, Utility Coordination Form, is a tool for applicants to use to help solicit information from utilities. This form does not need to be submitted as part of the application. Attachment 6, Draft Agreement, is a sample agreement that awardees will have to sign upon award. The agreement outlines requirements and procedures that awardees must follow. Attachment 8, Example Letter of Credit, is an example for applicants as to the information and requirements that must be provided by awardees in their letter of credit. Applicants are strongly urged to conduct their due diligence as it relates to the NEVI formula program and the federal, state, and local laws that apply to this funding. Recommended reference documents are listed here and included in the RFP. These are the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Standards and Requirements, the FHWA NEVI Formula Program Guidance, the FHWA NEVI Program Frequently Asked Questions, and MnDOT's NEVI Program website. Now we will review eligibility of applicants and costs. Eligible applicants include, but are not limited to, for-profit businesses, privately owned electric utilities, nonprofit organizations, governmental entities, tribal nations, utilities, teaming partnerships that include the above eligible entities with a clear primary applicant and point of contact. Other requirements include each application can only include one site. Applicants may submit only one application per cluster. Applicants may submit applications for more than one cluster. Applications for locations outside of the identified 18 clusters will not be accepted. Ineligible applicants include entities or individuals that are currently suspended or debarred by the state of Minnesota or the federal government. The RFP provides full details, but here is a highlight of eligible capital costs. Grantees will be reimbursed for eligible costs according to the cost proposal form, Attachment 4. Applicants may apply for grant funds for up to 90% of the eligible costs, with a minimum required match of 10% to be provided by the applicant. NEVI formula funds will cover up to 70% of the eligible costs, and state funds will cover up to 20% of the eligible costs. The remaining project costs are the responsibility of the applicant. Eligible costs are expenses deemed to be eligible by 23 Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 680, and 2 CFR Part 200 Subpart E cost principles. To be considered directly related to the operation of an EVSE station, an item must be a necessary component in the EVSE station operations, be a necessary component to connect the EVSE charging station to the electricity source or to supply power from the electricity source, enable management of electricity demand or backup availability if applicable, provide eligible signage to direct EVs to the charging station, or provide information to EV users about use of the charging station. This includes costs of new public EVSE charging stations, as well as upgrades to existing EVSE charging stations. It should be noted that eligibility of costs applies to all proposed ports in the project, not just the 4 minimum ports. Here is an overview of eligible operations and maintenance costs. Additional detail can be found in the RFP. Note that electricity costs, including demand charges, are an eligible expense for any amount above the average price for electricity paid by businesses. The warranty can either be a pre-purchased 5-year warranty included in capital costs, or it can be paid yearly as O&M. It cannot be both. You must choose if you would like it to be an upfront capital cost or a yearly O&M cost. The same is true for the EVSE. It can either be an upfront purchase as a capital cost or a lease paid yearly as part of O&M. You must choose one option. Administrative costs to manage the program, including the data reporting of quarterly, annual, or one-time data as required under 23 CFR 680.112, are eligible. Keep in mind that all eligible reimbursements must be included in your cost proposal. Unforeseen costs that were not included in your proposal will not be reimbursable. There are a few highlights on ineligible costs we want to note. Costs incurred prior to a fully executed agreement with MnDOT are ineligible. Costs for additional ports or chargers that are not compliant with 23 CFR 680 are ineligible. Level 2 chargers, if reimbursement is sought for the Level 2 chargers, are ineligible. The NEVI funding comes from both federal and state sources. This means there are many requirements for administration, implementation, and use. I'm going to touch on the requirements in terms of laws and regulations that apply, requirements that will supplement the application, award requirements, and post-award requirements. These requirements are fully disclosed in the RFP package and references. A few highlights are included on this slide. As previously mentioned, the NEVI formula program aims to establish a network of DCFC infrastructure consisting of sites with a minimum of 4 ports capable of continuous charging at 150 kilowatts concurrently. These sites shall be located no farther than 50 miles apart and shall not be located more than 1 driving mile from the AFC. Funding for any agreement resulting from this RFP will be paid from NEVI formula funds and state funds. The grantee will be required to provide at least 10% contribution, applicant cost share, to the overall project costs that are authorized by an agreement between the grantee and MnDOT. All applicable requirements of Title 23 United States Code of Regulations and 2 CFR Part 200 apply to the administration of these funds, which include, but are not limited to, 23 CFR 680, the Davis-Bacon Act, FHWA Form 1273, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the National Environmental Policy Act of 1969, and the Build America, Buy America Act. Projects funded under any agreement resulting from this RFP will be covered by the Build America, Buy America implementation plan to enhance Buy America for electric vehicle chargers. EV chargers manufactured on or after July 1st, 2024 must have final assembly occur in the U.S., and cost of components manufactured in the U.S. is at least 55% of the cost of all components. MnDOT will require Buy America documentation from grantees. In addition to these requirements, the grantee must comply with all other standards and requirements that may be required by federal, state, and local laws. We've already reviewed the parts of the application, but there are a few that deserve a bit more explanation. First, I want to touch on the letter pieces of the application. The letter from the site owner. Part of the NEVI program is to assure public access to the proposed sites 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the year for the life of the agreement. The letter must come from the site owner and make specific statements about access for the life of the agreement and rights to MnDOT to enter the property. Letter from the bank or financial institution. Each applicant will provide a signed letter from a bank or financial institution stating that if the applicant is selected to receive an award, the applicant will be able to provide the required letter of credit at the time of the agreement. The pre-award requirements covered in Section 8 of the RFP. These are risk-based audit and financial reviews required by the MnDOT NEVI program. Full details are included in Section 8 of the RFP. Under the award phase, it is worth noting that applicants cannot incur or agree to pay any cost to be requested for reimbursement prior to execution of the agreement in the award phase. This phase will also require a signed site host agreement, a signed letter from the utility, a letter of credit from a bank or financial institution, and proof of registration to do business in Minnesota. Post-award. At this point, our successful applicants have become grantees and will be eligible to invoice MnDOT in accordance with the requirements. Cost reimbursement for construction will be invoiced quarterly upon compliance with the reporting requirements detailed in Attachment 2, Scope of Work and Deliverables. MnDOT will withhold 20% of each reimbursement invoice. Of this withholding, 20% will be released on an annual basis at the time of the final O&M payment of the year, if all performance requirements and obligations of the agreement are met. During the O&M period, deductions will occur from the final quarterly O&M payment of each year when the invoice for reimbursement is submitted for every percentage point or fraction thereof that the 97% uptime is not met on a per port basis, per the NEVI rule. $1,000 will be deducted from that quarter's O&M payment. The uptime will be calculated during the month the invoice is submitted for the prior 12 months of operation. If there is no remaining O&M payment for the deduction to be subtracted from, the amount will be deducted from the remaining withholding. Once deducted, the funds can never be reclaimed. MnDOT will provide an invoice form for grantees to use. It will require that grantees include cost share for each line item. The grantee is not allowed to make more than a reasonable return on investment on the project. Reasonable return on investment on the project is defined as no more than 15% annual profit on the project. The profit calculation is included in Section 9 of the RFP. So let's transition for a moment to how MnDOT is accepting applications for this RFP. MnDOT will be accepting applications electronically through an online submittal. The link to this application portal is included in Step 5, Submit an Application, on the MnDOT NEVI page located at www.dot.state.mn.us/NEVI. The form will walk you through the required fields. The first section requires the lead applicant to enter their SWIFT vendor ID, federal tax ID, and unique entity identifier, along with the registered vendor's name and mailing address. The next section is where you would enter the primary point of contact name, phone number, and email address. This information will be what MnDOT uses to gain applicants' clarifications if necessary. Next, you will select the AFC corridor you are applying to, the cluster name, and the exit number. Remember, you can only submit one application per cluster. Next, you will attach all 5 required elements of the application. Attachment 3, Signed Technical Application Form, including all required information detailed in Attachment 3 as a searchable PDF. Attachment 4, Signed Cost Proposal Form, XLSX format. Letter from the site owner as a searchable PDF. Letter from the bank or financial institution as a searchable PDF, and acknowledgement of Federal Form 1273 as a searchable PDF. Friendly reminder that documents must be submitted in the required format and be searchable. Lastly, you need to read the notices, click the acknowledgement box, and hit Submit to send the application to MnDOT. If you hit Cancel, the form will clear and nothing will be sent to MnDOT. Once MnDOT receives your application, it will sit in a holding area until the close of the RFP period. Then it will be formally sent to the NEVI contract manager to begin a multi-step evaluation process. All applications will be reviewed for responsiveness, a responsiveness check, to confirm the application meets the RFP requirements. The responsiveness check is a 2-step pass-fail assessment. The first step is a non-technical responsiveness check. This includes checks for things like making sure all required forms are complete, in the correct format, and signed. Applications that fail the non-technical responsiveness check will be determined to be non-responsive and will not be evaluated further. If an applicant or application fails to meet one or more of the requirements detailed in Attachment 3, Technical Application Form, it may be determined to be non-responsive. The second step is a technical responsiveness check. This includes checks to ensure that the proposed equipment and site meet the minimum technical requirements of the NEVI program in the RFP. Applications that fail the technical responsiveness check will be determined to be non-responsive and will not be evaluated further. If an applicant or application fails to meet one or more of the requirements detailed in Attachment 3 Technical Application Form, it may be determined to be non-responsive. All requirements can be found in Attachment 3 Technical Application Form and in the NEVI requirements detailed in 23 CFR 680. Applications that pass the responsiveness checks will be scored based on their technical merit. Each application will be independently scored by the members of a review committee that is made up of at least 3 members, and the individual scores in each category will be averaged to give the final score for the application. Applications will be scored in several different categories, with a total of 175 points available in the technical evaluation. Full details on the scoring criteria for the technical evaluation can be found in the RFP package. The cost evaluation will be calculated based on an objective formula that compares the cost of the proposal to the lowest cost from all responsible applications. The cost proposal scores will be separated by cluster. The lowest cost proposal in each cluster will get 25 points, while more expensive proposals will receive fewer points that scale based on how much the cost increases. The final score for each application is the sum of the technical proposal score and the cost proposal score. A maximum of 200 points is available, and the review committee will make award recommendations based on which application receives the most points in each cluster. It is anticipated that the review committee will recommend 18 applications for award, 1 within each cluster. Applicants receiving awards will be notified after the award recommendation has been approved by the office director. MnDOT will notify successful applicants via email utilizing the point of contact information provided with the application. Intent to award will be posted on the MnDOT NEVI webpage. Moving on to our timeline associated with the RFP and evaluation process. Our major dates are included on this slide, along with where you can find additional details about each element. Questions about the RFP are due to MnDOT via email by January 10th at 5 p.m. Central Time. MnDOT will develop written responses to these questions and post them publicly on January 24th. Applications are due on February 9th, 2024 by 12 p.m. noon. Conditional awards are anticipated 90 days after. We appreciate your interest in the Minnesota NEVI program. Please email any questions to neviproject.dot@state.mn.us. Any person requiring the RFP in an alternative format can receive it at no cost. Please email your request to accessibility.dot@state.mn.us or call 1-833-400-8432, Relay Service 711. Any person requiring a special accommodation due to a disability should contact MnDOT by email at adarequest.dot@state.mn.us for assistance with this RFP at least 5 business days prior to the activity or action for which assistance is needed. Thank you.